30,000 concert goers, 2,000 police, one serial killer. Trap is the story of Josh Hartnett, a father, right, of a young daughter, Riley, who's taking her to a concert. She wants to go see her new favorite artist, Lady Raven, this kind of gothic Taylor Swift kind of character, who's doing a big surprise concert in their town. They arrive, he manages to get tickets, they show up, and you've probably seen the trailer, right? Turns out, not all is as it seems. The entire concert is a trap set to catch the Butcher, a local serial killer who's been making the news and scaring locals. But turns out Josh Hartnett might know something about this because he's got some footage on his phone of a man tied up in a basement. And he has to get out of there and get away from the cops and escape before anybody finds out the truth. It is a Hitchcockian thriller from director M. Night Shyamalan. And it's exciting and it's different. And it features music from his daughter, Shyamalan Shyamalan, who also stars in the film as Lady Raven. She does the music for the film. A concert is functionally all built around her concert. It is an odd father-daughter sort of love letter horror thriller feature that I'm really excited to talk about because it kind of defied expectations, I think, a little bit for me. Andy, what did you think of Trap?
So I thought this was a mixed bag. I think parts of it work. I think the technicals are very strong, like the way it's filmed, the way it's shot, a lot of the setup with, they have a lot of police vehicles and things that they're working. They hired 1,000 extras to be the crowd and had to constantly move them around the stadium for different shots so it would look full. But the central premise is interesting. I think it's strong. It's just not executed particularly well. Josh Hartnett's character has to constantly come up with excuses to like kind of be away from his daughter, which don't really work. And kind of how you get from point A to point B to point C doesn't work. The transitions don't work, but a lot of the individual scenes on their own, I think are good. Really strong acting. Shyamalan actually does a fair bit of acting in this. I thought she was surprisingly good. She had a bigger role than I thought. Same thing with Allison Pill and Hayley Mills. And if you don't know who Hayley Mills is, she plays the psychologist, the profiler in this. But she was the original girl from the original Parent Trap from like 1962 that she did when she was like 17. And this was like, she hasn't done a movie in a really long time. So it's really, really funny that she ended up in this. So there's lots to talk about. I think there is a lot that work. Like most Shyamalan, it's just, it's sloppy and it doesn't come together. But I think there's still a lot of positive things to talk about.
All right. So I'm going to come out on the other side of this. I disagree that it's sloppy. I take it back. It is sloppy, but I do want to highlight what you opened with is absolutely correct. It's strong in the technicals. It's a well shot movie. Shyamalan is really good at understanding where to place the camera and how to build space. And he does this really clever thing in this movie where he'll do 1 point perspective with people that Hartnett is talking to at the concert. You see it in the trailer, right? Jamie, the concert guy, the guy working there who's selling shirts, who's like, this whole place is a trap. He explains it straight to the camera, right? And Hartnett talks straight back to him. This happens a number of times in the feature. Additionally, he's got to, kind of navigate things with his daughter because she's none the wiser, right? Like she's just at the concert. So we, the audience members, know there's suspense, that we know that there's stakes. We know there's something going on here. And our protagonist has to try to get out of the mousetrap before it snaps on him. It's Hitchcockian because it's a bit of a bottle feature, right? Like you've got your whole conflict happening in one set place, but the place it's happening is very large and very grand and big in scale. And that's something that Shyamalan does really well in this movie. I think the concert stuff works really good. They got floor seats functionally, so you're already pretty close to the stage. But as the film goes on, we begin to move closer and further. There's like hidden panels that come out of the floor for special effects stuff. There's goofy costumes on stage. There's big set designs. And the music isn't bad, admittedly. Like for what's here, Shyamalan not only does a good job acting in the movie, she did a good job putting the music together. The performances are solid. They're sultry and big tones, big vocals. Like I think all that stuff works really good. But I think where this movie falters is the broad strokes of the script, which Shyamalan penned, right? Like it's the big writing. It's how we get from A to B to C to D, and keeping your audience on that track and believing that the world you're building is real. That's where things get shaky. That's where I think people feel like Trap underperforms and doesn't keep interest. And you go, wait a second, how did he get from there to there? How did this happen that way? That doesn't make any sense. You start to poke holes in the narrative of Trap because admittedly, it's a premise that's kind of full of holes, I think. And that does create some problems.
Yeah, it's kind of like a B movie. And I think Josh Hartnett does a great job. But unfortunately, he's like a much more incompetent Hannibal Lecter, like because he's supposed to kind of, he's ahead of, he's outsmarted the police, he's outsmarted everyone, but he's trapped here, he's trying to get out. He keeps needing to like go places while he's at the concert, and so he leaves his daughter like 3 or 4 times. Like he's like, oh, I gotta go check on this or that, I gotta go get a t-shirt, and it's real clumsy. Like it's just like no one would believe you, like you're so suspicious right now. And also the plan to like trap him isn't very good either, because it's just like, oh, we're gonna get him on the way out, but it's like there's 3,000, they identified 3,000 men, and it's just like could easily just saunter his way out. I don't think that's a very good plan either. We are not at the concert the entire time, which I was kind of glad to see, but the way we kind of get out of there and move to a different locations is also fairly implausible. Like he's supposed to kind of be like a criminal genius, and it's just not very smart, or it's just not kind of believable enough. But once we get to those different locations, it is a lot more interesting.
Yeah, I really can't understate how good Hartnett is in this movie. It's such a delight to see him playing a protagonist role again. I know we saw him recently in Oppenheimer as a brief supporting cast, just like many other people, many other great actors in that movie. And it's nice to see him in the front, and I think he's doing a great job with what's here. Shyamalan reportedly casted him after they met and kind of talked about movies they were working on, and Hartnett told him he was working on Oppenheimer. And then they got to talking about their daughters, because they both have 3 daughters, as I understand. It's funny, one of Shyamalan's other daughters is in film. She made The Watchers, which is another thriller that just came out. It was her first movie. We didn't cover it on this show. There's a brief shot of a billboard of The Watchers in this movie, though. So, like, making sure we got some love on both sides of the aisle. Shout out Shyamalan. But reportedly, after meeting and talking about being a father to daughters and what that's like that's when Shyamalan really fell in love with the idea of Hartnett taking on the role. It's also funny you mentioned Silence of the Lambs, Andy. That's exactly how Shyamalan pitched this feature. He said it is like Silence of the Lambs at a concert, which is like probably too big, I think, for what it is. But I mean, you're right in the way that like you have this seedy character who is presented as rather sharp, who is acting like somebody they're not, and trying desperately to get out of the situation that they're kind of trapped in. And for what it's worth, while I do think him getting away from Riley and Riley, I should say, played by Ariel Donahue, who's good. She's good. She's fine. No problems with Riley. Him asking to leave her for the 5th or 6th time, and her for the 2nd or 3rd time being like, "Dad, you're being really weird. What's going on?" It's like, okay, you're really stretching like as far as people would believe this. But I had an okay time putting that stuff on the side, because I felt like I knew going in that Trap is on its face an absurd premise, and I wasn't looking for anything that's like too grounded in realism. I just kind of wanted to have fun at the movies. And in that way, I should say, I think that's somewhere where Shyamalan's dialogue shines. I think you can start to wander in so bad it's good territory when it comes to Shyamalan's chunky dialogue, because it's always been chunky. Even in stuff that he built off other stuff, like Knock at the Cabin was based on a book, and even that one had chunky dialogue. Like he didn't even write all that. But like somehow in here, it managed to work for me. I fell under the spell. I kind of fell into it. I heard people comparing him to auteurs like Yorgos Lanthimos and Wes Anderson with their dialogue. I don't know if I'd go as far as to say that's
out of here.
Come on now. I don't think that's true. But the man's been working for 25 years. Like he's got the basics down so good that he can get creative with the camera. He can get creative with the premise. I don't know. I kind of went for it. It kind of worked, which is a surprise because it got like a 50 on Rotten. And when I tweeted that I liked it, people were like, "What do you mean?" But
there were parts that do work in that Silence of the Lambs kind of way, where he creates some several smart distractions that are pretty sinister. Like when we see this in the trailer, like he there's a woman who's a little ill and he kind of bumps into her and she falls down the stairs, and that creates a big distraction enough for him to go do something. And then he throws some bottles of oil into the deep fryer, which create a small explosion. Again, distraction. And there's a part where he gets his hands on a radio. Those little things are smart, but then some of the larger strokes, like you have to really suspend disbelief to. That's the part that doesn't quite work. I did like this. Reminded me a lot of Tenet, actually, the very opening, because Tenet has there's a big concert going on, lots of police outside running through the venue,
the opera.
Yeah, exactly. So very similar in that way. The dialogue for me, sometimes it is kind of bad.
It's kind of bad. Yeah.
It's like if you're writing a screenplay and you're writing your first draft and you don't really have the dialogue down, you just kind of write like the idea of like what you want to get to. And that's what this feels like. It just needed a lot more polish to make the dialogue feel more natural.
Yeah. Additionally, I don't want to talk too much about spoilers or where things go, but in the broad strokes, I should say this film has a problem of the wandering protagonist, namely in that it can't really decide who the protagonist is towards the end of the feature. Because if you think of Silence of the Lambs, right, Hannibal Lecter is not the lead. Hannibal Lecter's only in like 16 minutes of that movie. And this movie kind of takes some liberties, I think, with kind of who is in charge of the action at multiple points, and it pivots around. And a couple people I know that have seen it have talked about it and brought it up. It's odd. So if you see it, write into the show, let us know what you think. But I additionally think, I don't know, Shalika Shyamalan's really good, Hartnett's really good, and yeah, it's a goofy premise, but like for summer at the movies, like I think I had a pretty good time for 90 minutes. I do want to mention, before I wrap it up though, the relationship between Shyamalan and his daughter, who handled the music and starred in this. Shalika, this is her first film she's ever starred in, as far as I know, and she does a good job in it, right? Like she's not bad, and Trap is this sort of meta love letter to Shyamalan, and him standing in the audience at her concerts and watching her perform and seeing her from the side of the audience is a big part of this, and seeing the big screens and seeing the costumes and seeing the security officers and the people in the arena. Like, that's all a big part of it. And I think where this comes from is Shyamalan being a filmmaker, being a creative, being in that audience and letting his mind wander a little bit and thinking, this is an interesting scenario. This is an interesting setup. What if something was off here? What if I was a bad guy and needed to escape? How would that work? How would that look? And yeah, it's kind of a goofy thought exercise on the one hand, but on the other, it's a bit of a bottle thriller, and it's a bit of maybe not so thrilling as this funny at times, but ultimately, like I ended up having a surprising amount of fun with Trap. I don't know.
Right.
You think that's What do you think?
Yeah, I think there's definitely fun to be had. Again, you got to go in not taking it too seriously. It is a little bit like a Twilight Zone or a Black Mirror episode, something along those lines. Technology is actually a big part of it, and I also want to remind everyone that Shyamalan has this unique strategy with his movies where he self-finances them, makes them, and then sells them to a studio. And so that's why his stuff gets made a little bit more, because a studio, he doesn't have to greenlight it at a studio. He doesn't have to get all these people on board and get that money. He self-finances, which is why they are a little on the cheap side sometimes, or cheaper side. But it's a strategy that keeps him working and producing a lot of what he wants to do. Yeah.
As a agent of maniacal chaos, I think Hartnett, Cooper is the name of his character. I probably should have opened with that. Hartnett's a lot of fun, and I think in that same way, like Shyamalan brings a certain something to his writing that is here in Trap that I didn't see so much in Knock at the Cabin. And I should say, like, I do like that it's nice to see him in kind of the thriller zone again. You know what I mean? Like, Knock at the Cabin is certainly tense, but Old and Knock at the Cabin both give you the premise right up front. And, well, Old takes way too long, actually, to get to the premise, but it's based on a graphic novel. It's fine. I guess you could lean that way. Like, I like that this movie, within, like, the first 15 minutes, catches you up to the trailer. And you're like, okay, I'm in line. I'm in the queue. I'm here for whatever's going to happen in Trap. Good pacing, albeit odd. Like, I don't know. I think it ends up being a fun feature. Any other thoughts or recommendations, Andy? I should wrap it up.
I think I'm ready.
Andy, would you recommend Trap?
I would, but I would say save it for streaming. I think it is worth giving it a watch. But if you're not super excited about it, maybe wait till home. That said, a lot of the concert stuff works really well on the big screen, the big audience, the big dance numbers, the stage, the lighting, all that that works better probably in the theater because it's more immersive. But I'm going to say save it for streaming.
I'm gonna go the other way. Go see it in a theater. Although, like Andy said, I think you had a great explanation of like what you should expect, like Twilight Zone, Black Mirror episode kind of stuff. Soft gloves, nothing big. Nobody's attacking the president of the United States. There's no global war on terror. Trap is very small, and like I think that's kind of cool for what it is. I ended up having a lot more fun with it than I thought I would. I think Trap's good stuff. You should go see it in the theater if you can. Don't sweat bringing a friend group. They may not all love it. It's rather divisive according to Rotten, but for what it's worth, like I think Trap is not a good movie, but fun movie. And ultimately, like when you're going to the movies this summer, like I think that's I think it's worth mentioning. I think it's commendable. Speaking of commendable, we got to talk about some big announcements that just happened this last week. We were off of the week. We were off last week. We're here now. We're here to cover it. Andy, what do we call this segment?
It's time for the death of cinema.